The story begins with a man who decides to pay an unexpected visit to his son-in-law's house, hoping to spend some time with family and strengthen bonds that had slowly been fading. He had no idea that this simple visit would change his entire life. As he drives down the familiar streets, his heart fills with a mix of excitement and nervousness. But the moment he reaches the gate, his world stops. Parked right there, unmistakably, is his wife's car. Confused and unsettled, he wonders why she would be at their son-in-law's place without telling him. They had been married for over 30 years, and though their relationship had seen its share of ups and downs, he had always believed there was honesty and trust between them. He parks his car a short distance away, deciding to observe before making his presence known. As he waits, he hears laughter from inside the house, laughter that sounds far too familiar, too intimate. His heart sinks as doubt begins to cloud his mind. He moves closer, quietly, his steps careful, his emotions battling between fear and denial. He hears voices, his son-in-law's deep tone and his wife's gentle one. They're speaking in low whispers, but the words that follow cut through him like a knife. She says he can't find out. Not yet. The man's entire body trembles. For a moment, he feels as if the world around him has shattered. Every heartbeat echoes the betrayal he never imagined facing from the two people he trusted most. He stands frozen, struggling to make sense of it all. His mind races back through the years, the sacrifices he made, the love he gave, the loyalty he held. Had it all meant nothing? He remembers the days when he worked tirelessly to build a home and a future, believing his family was his greatest treasure. And now, standing in the shadow of his son-in-law's house, he realizes how fragile human trust can be. The words he hears next twist the knife deeper. His wife talks about money, about selling property, about keeping him out of the picture. The realization hits him hard. Not only was his heart being betrayed, but his life's work was being quietly stolen. Overwhelmed with emotion, he walks away silently. He doesn't confront them, doesn't shout or demand explanations. Instead, he returns home, sits in the silence of his empty living room, and lets the pain wash over him. The betrayal feels unbearable, but amid the heartbreak, a strange calm begins to take root. He realizes that confronting them in anger would only destroy what little dignity he had left. He decides instead to act with wisdom and patience. He reviews his finances, looks through property documents, and makes sure everything legally belongs to him. What they didn't know was that he had already secured his assets under his name long ago. Days pass, and his wife returns home pretending nothing happened. He says nothing, only watching her with quiet sadness. When she mentions visiting their son-in-law again, he smiles faintly and nods. But behind that calm expression lies a decision that will change everything. He decides to leave not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. He sells the house and moves to another city, leaving a simple note behind. You both have each other. That should be enough. I'll find peace where there's honesty. When his wife and son-in-law return and find the note, panic strikes. They realize that the man they underestimated had known everything. They are left with regret and guilt, facing the emptiness of their choices. The story ends with the man sitting by the sea watching the sunset, alone but finally free. He reflects that sometimes losing what hurts you is the first step toward finding peace. His heart may have been broken, but his spirit remained unshaken. The lesson is clear. Betrayal can wound deeply, but dignity and wisdom can heal even the deepest scars. The story begins with an ordinary day that quickly turns into something unforgettable. The man, a calm and respectful husband, sets out to visit his son-in-law, not expecting anything unusual. The drive is peaceful at first, filled with simple thoughts about family and routine matters. But as he turns onto the quiet suburban street where his son-in-law lives, something catches his eye and freezes his breath. Parked just a few meters away from the gate is a familiar car, one he has seen every single day for years. His wife's car. For a moment he doubts himself, thinking maybe he is mistaken, but as he slows down and looks closely, there's no denying it. The same dent on the side, the same sticker on the rear window. It is hers. His heart begins to race. Questions flood his mind. What could she be doing there? She had told him she was visiting her sister in another town. A cold wave of confusion and disbelief rushes through him. His hands tighten on the steering wheel and his throat feels dry. He doesn't want to jump to conclusions, but the situation feels wrong. 1,000 thoughts twist through his head, and none of them bring comfort. The trust he has carried for years begins to tremble under the weight of doubt. He parks his car a little distance away, not wanting to be seen. Sitting there in silence, he stares at the house gate, his pulse echoing in his ears. Memories of his wife's laughter and kindness flash in his mind, mixing painfully with this strange moment of uncertainty. He remembers the years of companionship, the promises, the sacrifices they made for each other. Could it all have been a lie? The longer he sits, the heavier his heart feels. The mind that once saw his wife as his greatest blessing now begins to fear she may be hiding something. The man's emotions twist between anger and heartbreak. He wants to rush in, to demand answers, to expose whatever is going on. But something inside him whispers to wait, to watch, to think. His logical side tries to take control, reminding him that appearances can be misleading, that there might be an innocent reason behind what he's seeing. Yet the emotional storm doesn't calm. Every minute feels like an hour as he wrestles with suspicion and love. As he sits in that car, looking at the familiar vehicle near the gate, his thoughts wander to his son-in-law. They have always shared a good relationship, built on respect and trust. He cannot imagine betrayal coming from either of them, but the human mind, once shaken, looks for patterns of deceit even where none may exist. He starts recalling little moments from the past. A strange phone call, his wife leaving the room suddenly, her vague answers about her schedule. Things that once seemed harmless now feel suspicious in the light of this discovery. This moment becomes the emotional core of his journey, the point where love, trust, and doubt collide. He feels like a stranger in his own life, trapped between wanting to believe the best and fearing the worst. His chest feels heavy with betrayal, even though no one has confessed anything. It is a silent suffering, the kind that burns from within without a single word being spoken. The sight of his wife's car becomes a symbol of everything he knows and everything he fears to lose. The man realizes that trust, once shaken, is like glass. Even if not shattered, the cracks remain. Yet deep down, a small voice inside him hopes for an explanation, something that can bring peace back into his heart. He takes a deep breath, deciding not to act out of rage but to search for the truth. Whatever the answer may be, he knows that this moment will change everything. His faith, his relationships, and perhaps even the way he understands love itself. The man's world feels unsteady as he sits in his car, staring at his wife's vehicle parked outside his son-in-law's gate. The initial shock has turned into an ache of uncertainty that presses heavily against his chest. He needs to know the truth, but he also fears what that truth might do to him. After a few minutes that feel like an eternity, he steps out of his car quietly and walks closer, his heart thumping so hard it almost drowns out the sound of his footsteps. The afternoon sun is beginning to fade, casting long shadows that seem to mirror the doubts stretching across his heart. As he approaches the house, he slows down and hides behind a small hedge near the gate. He doesn't want to be seen. He just wants to understand what is happening before he makes any decisions. He can hear faint voices coming from inside, and one of them sounds unmistakably like his wife's. Her gentle tone, the rhythm of her laughter, familiar yet strange in this setting. The sound cuts through him like a knife. She is supposed to be out of town, visiting her sister. What could she possibly be doing here with their son-in-law without telling him? His mind starts to weave painful stories. Could they be having a secret conversation behind his back? Is there some kind of betrayal unfolding? Every second adds to the weight in his chest. He feels foolish for even imagining such things, but doubt has a cruel way of feeding on fear. The more he listens, the less sure he becomes of anything. He remembers how their relationship used to be, strong, filled with laughter and mutual respect. They had shared decades together, raising children, facing hardships, and celebrating small joys. But lately, things had changed slightly. His wife had seemed distracted, distant even. He thought it was just stress or aging, but now he isn't so sure. Then, through the half-open window, he hears something that freezes him in place. His wife's voice trembles slightly as she says something about not wanting to tell him until she was sure. His heart twists. What was she hiding? His mind races between possible explanations: illness, a financial problem, or something even more personal. The tone of her voice doesn't sound romantic or deceitful. It sounds emotional, almost nervous. That gives him a flicker of hope, but confusion still clouds his thoughts. He steps back, trying to calm himself, but emotions rise like a storm. His instinct screams to confront her right now, to demand answers, but a small part of him urges patience. Maybe she has a reason, maybe there is more to the story than what appears. The battle between anger and restraint rages within him. He decides to retreat, to give himself time to think clearly before reacting. He returns to his car, his hands trembling as he grips the steering wheel. Driving home feels surreal. The same roads he has driven for years now feel foreign, like the world around him has shifted slightly out of place. He glances at his wedding ring and remembers the day he placed it on her finger, promising to love and trust her forever. Trust, the very thing that now feels uncertain. He wonders if love can truly survive without it. That night, sleep refuses to come. He sits by the window, replaying everything he heard and saw. The image of her car outside the gate haunts him. He tries to convince himself that there must be a reasonable explanation, but every possible scenario keeps circling back to pain. He feels betrayed not only by her presence there, but also by her silence. Why hadn't she told him? Why hide something so significant? As dawn breaks, he realizes that no matter what truth awaits him, he must face it calmly. Whether his fears are real or misplaced, he owes it to himself to find out. Doubt, left unresolved, can destroy more than betrayal ever could. The only way forward is through honesty, even if it hurts. What he doesn't know yet is that the truth he's about to uncover will not only answer his questions, but also reveal a side of love and loyalty that he never expected. One born not from deceit, but from sacrifice. The next morning, the man woke up with a heavy heart and a restless mind. Sleep had evaded him, replaced by endless thoughts about what he had seen and heard the day before. The image of his wife's car outside his son-in-law's gate replayed in his mind like a haunting film, and the sound of her voice, soft yet secretive, echoed in his ears. He knew he couldn't live with uncertainty any longer. He had to face her not with anger, but with the calmness of a man who deserved the truth. When she returned home later that day, she appeared composed, even cheerful, as if nothing unusual had happened. Her calmness only deepened his unease. He watched her move around the kitchen, humming softly, and every small gesture reminded him of the decades they had spent together. He wanted to believe in her innocence, but his heart carried too much doubt. Finally, he gathered the courage to speak. "I saw your car yesterday," he said quietly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Outside Michael's gate." She froze. The sound of the spoon clattering against the counter echoed in the silence that followed. Slowly, she turned to face him. Her eyes widened slightly, not in guilt, but in surprise. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was thick, built on love, fear, and the uncertainty of what might come next. Then, with a deep breath, she sat down and motioned for him to do the same. "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But I didn't know how." Those words made his pulse quicken. He braced himself for what he thought would be the worst, a confession that might shatter the life they had built. But instead, she began to explain something completely unexpected. She told him that their daughter, Michael's wife, had been struggling silently. The young couple had been under immense financial pressure, and Michael had been too proud to ask for help. Their daughter had confided in her mother but begged her not to tell him, fearing he might misunderstand or step in with anger, so she had gone to see Michael privately to help him sort out the debt and negotiate with the bank. She had taken some of her personal savings, hoping to quietly solve the problem before it became public. She hadn't told her husband because she didn't want him to worry, or worse, to feel betrayed that their daughter had hidden something from them both. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes. Her hands trembled as she explained how torn she had felt between honesty and protection, between trust and fear. He listened silently, every word sinking deeper into his heart. The storm of doubt that had consumed him began to calm. The picture that had seemed so dark and incriminating now looked entirely different. Not a portrait of betrayal, but one of love and sacrifice. When she finished, she looked at him with tears running down her cheeks and whispered, "I just didn't want you to think I kept something from you. I only wanted to protect everyone." For the first time in 2 days, he felt his chest loosen. The anger that had been building was replaced by guilt. Guilt for having doubted the woman who had stood by him through everything. He reached across the table, took her hand, and said softly, "You should have told me, but I understand now." That night he couldn't help but think about how fragile trust can be, how easily fear can twist perception. He realized that love is not only about companionship, but also about patience, the ability to wait for the truth before letting emotions destroy something sacred. He also understood that silence doesn't always mean deceit. Sometimes it's the quiet burden of love trying to protect another from pain. In that moment, the house felt peaceful again. The doubts faded into lessons about communication, faith, and the dangers of assumptions. He realized that even after years of marriage, understanding one another was still something they both needed to work on. And as he looked at her that evening, sitting beside him in the glow of the lamp, he silently promised himself never to let suspicion come between them again. The next few days after their emotional conversation brought a sense of quiet understanding between the man and his wife. But what truly changed everything was what came after. The moment when truth began to reveal its deeper layers. The man decided to visit his son-in-law, Michael, not out of distrust this time, but with a desire to understand the full story. He wanted to hear things from the young man himself and ensure that everything his wife had told him was indeed true. When he arrived at Michael's house, the atmosphere was tense but humble. Michael seemed nervous to see him, unsure of what this unexpected visit might mean. They sat down in the small living room, and after some hesitation, the older man asked gently about the struggles they had been facing. To his surprise, Michael's eyes welled up as he spoke. He admitted that things had been difficult for months. The pressure of work, a loan he had taken to expand his business, and the shame he felt for not being able to manage it on his own. He confessed that his wife, the older man's daughter, had tried to convince him to ask for help, but his pride wouldn't allow it. It was only when his mother-in-law showed up unexpectedly one day that he finally broke down and told her everything. The older man listened in silence, his heart aching as he realized the depth of their struggle. Michael went on to explain how his mother-in-law had offered her savings to help them settle part of the debt and had connected him with an old friend who worked at a local bank to negotiate the rest. "She saved us," Michael said with tears in his eyes. "If it weren't for her, we would have lost everything. The house, the business, our peace." Hearing this, the father felt a wave of shame wash over him for ever doubting his wife's intentions. She had carried the weight of their family's pain quietly, without expecting recognition or gratitude. It wasn't betrayal, it was selflessness. And in that moment he understood that her actions weren't about hiding something from him. They were about protecting the family, about love expressed through sacrifice. When he returned home that evening, he found his wife in the garden watering the flowers. She looked up at him, unsure of what to expect. But when she saw the softness in his eyes, she knew everything had changed. He walked up to her and said, "I spoke to Michael. He told me everything. You did more for this family than I could have imagined." For the first time in days, she smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that reached her eyes. What followed was a long, heartfelt conversation about trust, communication, and the weight that love sometimes carries. They talked about the dangers of silence and how misunderstandings can grow in the spaces left by unspoken truths. He realized that even though his intentions had been rooted in care, his doubts had nearly destroyed something beautiful. And she too understood that in trying to protect him from worry, she had unknowingly built a wall between them. Together they promised that there would be no more secrets, no more assumptions. From now on, they would face every challenge hand in hand, no matter how painful or complicated it might be. That night, for the first time in a long while, they sat together in their living room, laughing over old memories. their bond feeling stronger than ever. As he watched her smile, he couldn't help but think that life has a way of testing love in unexpected ways. Sometimes what looks like betrayal is just love disguised by fear. Sometimes pain teaches you to see more clearly what truly matters: honesty, patience, and compassion. And in that realization, he felt gratitude, not only for his wife's sacrifice, but for the lesson that had come from their misunderstanding. In the end, the incident didn't tear them apart. It drew them closer. It reminded them that love, when rooted in forgiveness and trust, can survive even the heaviest storms. And as they held hands under the quiet light of their home, they both knew that this moment, born from doubt, had turned into one of the most defining truths of their lives. The story reaches its most powerful moment when forgiveness enters the picture, not as a weakness, but as the ultimate strength. After everything that had happened, after the doubt, the anger, and the pain, the man finally understood that love and trust are fragile things, and once broken, they take time to heal. Yet, forgiveness has the power to rebuild even the deepest cracks. When he sat down one evening, thinking about everything that had unfolded, from seeing his wife's car at their son-in-law's house to discovering the truth behind it, he realized that the real damage hadn't come from her actions, but from his assumptions. His heart had been clouded by suspicion, and in doing so, he had nearly destroyed the peace of their marriage. He approached his wife with a quiet heart that evening, no longer filled with anger or accusations. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the sunset, lost in thought. When he walked in, she turned to him cautiously, unsure if another argument was about to begin. But instead of harsh words, he said softly, "I'm sorry." It was simple, but it carried the weight of every misunderstanding between them. Tears filled her eyes because, for the first time since the tension began, she felt seen and understood. He went on to tell her that he had finally realized how hard it must have been for her to carry the burden of helping their daughter and son-in-law alone. He admitted that he should have trusted her more, that he should have known she was only doing what she thought was right for the family. She listened quietly, her emotions raw but calm. Then, after a long silence, she whispered, "I didn't want to hide anything from you. I just didn't want to worry you." Those words hit him deeply, reminding him how love sometimes expresses itself not through grand gestures, but through silent acts of protection. In that moment, both of them found peace. The walls that had built up between them slowly began to crumble. They held hands, not needing many words, just the comfort of knowing that forgiveness had brought them back together. That night, for the first time in a long while, they sat together at dinner, laughing softly, the heavy air replaced with warmth. Forgiveness had opened the door for healing, and healing had made room for love to return stronger than before. Over the next few days, they visited their daughter and son-in-law together. The younger couple was surprised but grateful when they both arrived. It was the first time in weeks that everyone had sat at the same table as a family. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, gratitude, and humility. The man noticed how happy his wife looked, how her eyes lit up when she saw their daughter smile again. It was then that he understood something profound. Forgiveness is not only about letting go of anger, but about allowing love to live freely again. As time went on, the painful memory faded, replaced by the lessons it brought. The man realized that relationships, no matter how strong, are built on constant effort, on communication, empathy, and understanding. Doubt may be natural, but letting it control one's heart leads only to loneliness. His wife, too, learned that protecting someone doesn't mean hiding the truth. Love, she realized, is strongest when both hearts share the same burden. In the years that followed, their bond became unbreakable. Whenever small disagreements arose, they no longer raised their voices. Instead, they remembered this incident, the day suspicion almost destroyed their peace, but forgiveness rebuilt it. They began to cherish every quiet moment together, from morning coffee to evening walks, because they knew that love is not something you find. It's something you protect, nurture, and rebuild, even after it breaks. The story of that misunderstanding became something they often shared with their grandchildren later in life, not as a tale of shame, but as a lesson about patience, forgiveness, and humility. The old man would say, "If you love someone, listen before you judge, trust before you assume, and forgive, not because they deserve it, but because peace is worth more than pride." In the end, the power of forgiveness turned what could have been the end of their marriage into a new beginning. It reminded them that even when trust is shaken, it can be restored. Even when love is tested, it can endure. The past no longer haunted them. It guided them. And in the quiet comfort of each other's company, they found something greater than pride. They found peace, born from understanding and sealed with forgiveness.